Good morning. My name is Ellen Kokinda. I am filling in for Susan Reardon as the staff hearing officer. I am now opening the staff hearing officer meeting for Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. Let's go first into preliminary matters, starting with A, request for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items. I do not have any requests for any of those things. Moving on to B, announcements and appeals. I do want to make an announcement that the staff hearing officer's decision on 2 South Quarantina was appealed to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will be hearing that project Thursday, May 20th, so that's tomorrow at 1 p.m. So if you're interested in that, check it out. I also have 2 announcements, and there are actually 2 requests for coastal development permits, both for accessory dwelling units. And I've made my decision. The first one is for 230 San Clemente Street, so that's PLN 2020-00411. And then the second one is for 1121 Del Sol, which is PLN 2021-00083. This is an announcement. State law prohibits public hearings in these instances, and but it does allow for written public comment, and I have not received any written public comment on either one of these projects. Again, these are both for accessory dwelling units, requests for coastal development permits for accessory dwelling units. I've read both the staff reports and went out on site visits to both of these properties and agree with staff's analysis. I can go ahead and make the finding for both projects that the findings that have been outlined in the staff reports, that both projects are consistent with the zoning ordinance and the local coastal program, coastal land use plan. I also find that these projects are consistent with the Coastal Act. And just note that both projects have conditions of approval that are written in the staff report. And my approval of these 2 projects that for the coastal development permit is subject to these conditions of approval in those reports. These 2 sites are both located in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone, and therefore my action on these items is final. So that is my announcement. So moving on to C, in preliminary matters, is any public comment on items not on today's agenda. If you wish to speak and make a comment, again, this is not on on any kind of public comment not on today's agenda, you would need to raise your hand using the hand icon on your GoToMeeting control panel. Where the red arrow is. Once you raise your hand, it notifies me and I can call on you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And I do not see anyone at the time raising their hand. So we can actually go on to our first item, which is under projects, it's 1213 West Valerio Street. If I could have staff come on, Ms. Broadison. So this project, give me a moment here. Okay, so 1213 West Valerio Street. The project involves an addition of a 437 square feet to an existing 1,642 square foot, one-story single-family residence with a 385 square foot detached garage on a 6,744 square foot lot. The proposed residence would be 2,464 square feet, which is 86% of the maximum allowed floor to lot area ratio. So this discretionary application required for this project is an open yard modification to allow the private open yard area to have less than the required minimum dimensions of 20 feet by 20 feet. And Ms. Broadison, you are the staff planner for this particular project. If you would please go ahead and present your project. And I can't hear you just yet. Let me see if can you try speaking, Ms. Broadison? I still can't hear you. Let's see here. I'm going to turn, are those wireless headphones or are they plug in? Okay, why don't you unplug them and plug them back in? And we'll see if that works. And then Will's suggesting that your inline mic might be muted. All right, try saying something.
Good morning.
Okay, now we can hear you. Okay, that's great. Excellent. So how this is going to work, Ms. Broadison is going to present, and then I will give the applicant a chance to present. So Ms. Von Protz, if you could please mute yourself during staff's presentation, and then we'll have public comment and then go to questions. Okay, Ms. Broadison, to you, please.
Good morning, Ms. Kokenda. Thank you for the introduction. As you described, this project is located at 1213 West Valerio, which is on the city's west side, kind of below the Riviera, or I'm sorry, below the Mesa. And the applicant is requesting a modification. They'd like to do a modest one-story addition to the side and rear of the house behind the garage, approximately 437 square feet. The modification is required because the addition will encroach into the open yard. Normally for lots that are 5,000 square feet or more for single family residences, 1,250 square feet of open yard is required, and the minimum dimensions are 20 feet by 20 feet. For this project, the existing house is already non-conforming to those dimensions, and this addition would increase a little bit of that encroachment into the minimum dimensions. So it would still be, and the dimensions for the new open yard would be only 17 feet 4 inches wide at its most narrow section. However, it would still provide over 1,250 square feet of open yard. And it would be a usable amenity to the house. So staff is supportive of this reduction in open space because, as I said, the resultant open yard would be 17 feet wide at its most narrow section. And there will be approximately 882 square feet of the required open yard that will still meet those minimum 20 by 20 dimensions. So therefore, this proposed addition allows for an appropriate improvement on the lot while still meeting the intent of the open yard. The project was exempt from design review because the lot is not in the Hillside Design District and it's less than 17 feet in height. Staff also did an environmental review and found that the one-story addition is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act for existing facilities, section 15301. So staff recommends that the staff hearing officer find that the open yard modification is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. The proposed addition would be at the rear of the house, screened by the existing house and garage, and it would not have any negative visual impacts from the street. So the portion of the open yard does not meet the minimum dimensions, but there's still a significant amount of usable open yard for the lot. And that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant, Ms. Amy Von Protz, is here, and also Mr. Rossi is here, the property owner, to add to the project description.
Thank you, Ms. Brodesson. And I don't see Mr. Rossi on the call, but Ms. Von Protz, have you heard from him?
Yes, he's asked that you let him in. He's waiting. He said he's waiting.
Okay, it looks like I do not see his name in my list. Could it be under
He
another
just
name?
texted,
I have a,
Stack? Maybe Stack?
I'm sorry?
Do you have Holly Stack? Holly Stack?
No, I have Jill Hurd. Is that,
He said, yeah, he just said that he's waiting to be let in, still waiting to be let into the meeting. He just texted me.
okay. Can anyone else on the call, does anyone else know a Jill Hurd? Is that, if I'm gonna ask staff to, okay, so she's a member of the public, and I'm sorry that I've called you out. So I do not see him, he's not showing up, so he's gonna have to call back in. But for time purposes, why don't we go ahead and let you, Amy, if you, Ms. Von Protz, if you'd like to go ahead and present the project, and Mr. Rossi can join us. But I recommend that if he looks at the agenda, he can call in using the phone number. That is another solution, because I don't see.
Go ahead and
So I'll just let him know.
email that to him right now.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I will go ahead and email that to him right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Ms. Brodesson. And Ms. Von Protz, if you could share your webcam as well for your presentation.
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay.
There you go. All right. Thank you for hearing our request for modification this morning. I'm representing David Rossi and Holly Stack at 1213 West Valerio. The owners plan on doing an addition. We find that we cannot meet the city's required 20 feet dimension for open yard. We do have lot constraints, as the lot is not rectangular and it tapers towards the rear of the property. Our project, we are meeting the required 1,250 open yard, and we are meeting this current city's required setback requirements. Finally, our FAR is 86%. Our proposed FAR is 86%. That really concludes my presentation. And David Rossi is here, and he has found some, he's the owner, and he has found some archive information that he would like to present for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Ms. Von Protz, and Mr. Rossi, glad to see that you're able to join. I'm going to send you an unmute request. If you can just, you're able to share your mic. There we go. It looks like you're live now.
Okay,
If you'd like
can you
to
hear me
follow
okay?
up. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the time to participate. I just wanted to make a brief comment. I know that Santa Barbara planning staff is well aware of the archival documents for this site, but I just wanted to take a moment to emphasize that having reviewed some of the documents myself, I learned a few things. And one is that in 1963, the site was modified from the original footprint of the home to add an extension on the back. I did send a figure. I don't know if it's worth showing at this point, but I can verbally describe that addition that was put in 1963 widened the house to the point that the distance from the uphill neighbor The wall in question to the new addition was 18 feet. And that 18 feet is the dimension in question, requiring us to ask for a modification because it does not allow the full 20 by 20 open yard area that we would require. We intend to extend that wall, so we're not going to remove that wall, but we're going to extend it toward the back away from the street. And because of the tapering lot lines, the lot starts out wide at the street and narrows toward the back. That minimum dimension at the back corner of the proposed renovation is going to be 17 feet 4 inches. So I just wanted to emphasize that the wall in question is not a brand new wall. It's an existing wall that was approved in a 1963 renovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And now I don't have any questions at the moment, but I need to open it up for public comment. So if I could just ask that the applicants turn off their webcams and mute themselves, and then I can open that. And then I will ask you to come back on. So just for public comment, I'll ask you to turn webcams off. Okay, so if you wish to make public comment on this particular project, I would like to ask that you raise your hand using the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. You click it once and a green arrow up indicates, or I'm sorry, a red arrow pointing down indicates a raised hand. So if you wish to speak, I'm a little rusty after I haven't done this in so long, but it will indicate that you wish to speak and you'll have 2 minutes. So at the moment, I do not see anyone who wishes to speak on this project. So I'm going to go ahead and actually I didn't receive any written correspondence either. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment for this item, and then ask that the applicants and the owner come back on. If you could turn your webcams on and mic, please. And I can send webcam requests. So thank you. Okay, so I did go out to for a site visit where I met the Rossis and was able to see the yard. And as you were saying, Mr. Rossi, there is kind of an interesting succession of additions over the years and kind of how it's all been piecemealed. And I understand your project, you're interested in trying to have a more kind of cohesive floor plan. And knowing that, you know, as I looked at this particular open yard request, the small portion of it, we have multiple regulations for open yard. The one relief that you're requesting is this minimum dimension of 20 by 20. So that's really the question of what we're looking at here. And the existing development already kind of constrained the lot so that your open yard didn't meet that 20/20. So by adding this addition, it's basically you're not further. It's not more non-conforming. You've just stayed with the line. So just on that, you know, in terms of what we look for in open yard, we're looking for its intended purpose is to make sure that it promotes desirable living conditions, that there's a sense of openness, that you're providing minimum useful space for residents. And in this scenario, like I said, it doesn't intensify the non-conforming open yard, and you still have 1,263 contiguous open yard space, and our minimum is 1,250. So it's still a substantial, you know, it's still a substantial amount of open yard area for enjoyment. So, so I can agree with staff's analysis that this request is consistent with the zoning ordinance, and that this open yard modification is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. And let's see, in terms of Ms. Brodesson, you didn't have any other conditions for this project, just confirmation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, so I didn't see any other reason to add any condition. Staff did not recommend any. It is a fairly straightforward project, and it's just a small amount. This is an odd shaped lot, given that it tapers towards the end. So it's not really taking too much out of that particular area. So like I said, I am supportive of this particular request, but I just want you to know that my action is appealable to the Planning Commission. If anybody wishes to appeal my decision, it would need to be within 10 calendar days of this hearing. But otherwise, thank you for your time, and we can move on to the next project.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Kelly, thank
Take
you.
care.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, so give me just a moment and we can transition, and just want to make sure that, okay. So our next project B is an application of Tom Oxner, agent for David and Pat Waiters of 241 San Clemente, APN 045-151-005. This is in the E3 SD3 zone, general and coastal land use plan designation of low density residential, 5 dwelling units and acre. So this project consists of constructing a new detached 2-story building at the rear of the property, comprised of a 250 square foot accessory dwelling unit at the 2nd story and 234 square foot storage area below. The site is currently developed with a 998 square foot single unit residence with a 261 square foot attached 1-car garage. So the discretionary applications for this project are a modification to grant relief from parking standards, allowing for the existing non-conforming condition of 1 covered parking space to continue for the existing primary residence. And then it's also a coastal development permit to allow the proposed development in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. So because of this is a proposal for a detached ADU, when a proposed development involves the addition of an accessory dwelling unit to an existing single family residence, it would be reviewed by me, the staff hearing officer, without a public hearing. So the staff hearing officer shall not, I'm not issuing a decision on the application. Let's see. Really in terms of public comment, what that means is if for public comment, you can only comment on the modification portion of it, not the coastal development permit. So, so this discretionary portion of the hearing is for the parking modification. With that, we do have the applicant here, and I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Plummer for her staff report and to please walk us through the project. And then I will ask the applicant to come on and give your presentation. So Ms. Plummer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. And then Mr. Russell, can you go to page 11? That's the site plan. And then maybe just zoom in a little bit. Thank you. So as you noted, Ms. Kokinda, the proposal we're reviewing today is to construct a new detached 2-story building at the rear of the property, comprised of a 250 square foot accessory dwelling unit at the 2nd story and 234 square foot covered storage area below. And as you mentioned, the discretionary hearing today is to discuss a parking modification to allow for the non-conforming condition of 1 covered parking space to continue for the primary residence, and a coastal development permit to allow the proposed development in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. And as you mentioned, there's no public hearing for the ADU itself, but there is for the parking modification. So in terms of what I'll be presenting today, I will be presenting context of the ADU as it relates to the parking modification. So the existing development, as you see on the site plan, contains a 1-car garage dedicated to the primary residence. which is considered non-conforming to the required parking requirement of 2 covered spaces for the main residence. And you can see the existing residence is in white with the existing 1-car garage located slightly in the required 20-foot setback. It's actually 16 feet from the property line. And then for additional context, a recent building permit was issued for an addition to the primary residence that's noted as shaded. And it's on the plans for context of what's happening with the primary residence, as well as how that's going to relate to the parking modification. So that addition is a 499 square foot addition to the primary residence. And as I said, it was recently permitted. And that was under 50% of the existing floor area of the primary residence. The zoning ordinance allows non-conforming parking to remain up until the point where residential additions exceed 50% of the existing net floor area. So how that relates to this project is due to the addition of the accessory dwelling unit and storage below, combined with the 499 square foot addition to the primary residence under that building permit. The project now will exceed 50% of the existing floor area by 484 square feet. That 484 square feet is that new detached building comprised of the ADU and storage. And as a result, the non-conforming parking, the 1 covered garage, is required to be conforming with another additional covered parking space, or they can receive a parking modification to allow for the non-conforming condition of 1 parking space to remain. I will say the zoning ordinance does allow for an exception of 1 covered parking space in the case where your FAR is less, your maximum net floor area is less than 85% for the lot, which would be the case for this property. However, that's not possible given the project site foundation footprint of the 1-car garage and the primary residence, because that exception stipulates that you can't have an uncovered parking space in the front yard of the lot. So the finding for a parking modification requires that there will not be an increase in the demand for a parking space or a loading space in the immediate area. And how we came to our support on this was state legislation for the accessory dwelling unit allows it to be constructed with no parking, provided the site is with 1/2 mile of public transit, based on the determination that a small unit located within the proximity to transit will not create additional parking demand. There is a bus stop located at the intersection of Cliff Drive and La Marina, approximately 1,450 feet from the project site. Therefore, there was no additional parking required for the ADU or provided. And there's no parking demand associated with the storage space below the ADU. So that as well did not factor into an additional parking requirement. So further, and again, while the building permit has already been issued for the primary residence, I will provide context for why we still find it supportable in this case. So the 499 square foot addition essentially allows for a master bedroom and a large kitchen and dining room. And it's not anticipated to increase parking demand for the primary residence. Therefore, the relatively minor additions are not anticipated to increase parking demand. And I just want to go through some photos since I didn't cover that earlier. That's page 2 of the PDF, Mr. Russell. So the top far right picture shows the house. And I will say the building permit that was issued included, exterior changes to the private residence, as well as that new addition. And I included in the staff report that permit has since been revised to demo rebuild of the private residence. When they began doing construction, it did include some demolition of walls, but when the building inspector went out, it was determined that the existing framing was severely deteriorated and it wouldn't be safe construction. So they switched it to demo rebuild. But that gives you context of the house and as well as the 1-car garage, again, 16 feet from the property line. without a lot of room for additional improvements. And then as well, the top far left also shows a picture of the garage from the street and how it's oriented. And then additional photos, show the backyard of the residence. Actually, the bottom, I think, right there photo, yes, that kind of shows where the ADU is going to be proposed. There was a shed there previously, and now they're going to demo that and put the ADU there. And then let's see. I also wanted to just show. Go to the first page, Mr. Russell. And then you'll see a vicinity map. I just want to again show the bus stop that's 1,450 feet away. So that's 0.3 miles away from the residence, which satisfies state legislation. Thank you. And then you can go to let's see, I guess page 11, and then I'm going to have you go to page 15 after that. So the site plan. Thank you. Okay. So the project is exempt from design review by the Single Family Design Board, as the ADU is exempt per state legislation. However, there is a covered balcony at the second story of the accessory dwelling unit, which, even though it's dedicated to the ADU, is not considered an essential element of the building, and therefore it is subject to SFDB review. The SFDB reviewed this fairly recently and provided the comment that the covered balcony at the ADU is aesthetically appropriate and compatible with the proposed architecture for the new detached building, as well as the improvements to the main residence. It is 9 feet away from the adjacent property line, and they did say that is adequate and warrants relief from the 15-foot guideline for upper story decks in the single family design guidelines. And though it's not shown on the plans, I did want to say that the new detached building is adjacent to 237 San Clemente's open yard. So that was an additional reason why they felt it was appropriate to allow the 9-foot distance for that covered deck. And that summarizes my presentation. I'm here for any questions related to the parking modification. I will say I haven't received any written correspondence or questions related to the parking modification. Or really for the accessory dwelling unit. I have received various email questions about additions to the primary residence and that building permit, but that's not subject to the review today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. And now I would like to hand it over to Ms. Hughes. If you could turn your webcam on and walk us through if there's any comments you'd like to make, or what your rationale is for your request today.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda and Pilar, for your presentation. As Pilar mentioned, we're here for a parking modification for an existing single-family residence and the ADU with the storage area below. We have an existing single-car garage that we'd like to maintain on the property. Currently, that garage is encroaching slightly into the front yard setback, and because of the existing site constraints, we didn't feel like we could add on to that existing garage space without further encroaching into the setback. The accessory dwelling unit in the back with the storage area below, the storage was proposed to be used as storage for bicycles and other, recreational items that typically might be stored in a garage. So we thought that that would also provide additional relief for the existing parking space in the garage. And then we also felt that we're maintaining the existing character of the single family residence as a single story along the front of the street, and then just stepping up in the back with the accessory dwelling unit as the site slopes up in the back. The deck that faces the main residence and is close to the southern property line, we use that to kind of break up that's the only location where there's a two-story element on the site. So the deck was really to kind of reduce the massing of that building as it faces the existing residence. And I think we're under the FAR, as Pilar mentioned, we're at 65%. So we thought that the addition to the main house and the ADU was not increasing the demand for the parking space for the existing residents.
And does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to get to questions in a moment, but first I need to open it up to public comment. So Ms. Hughes, if you could please mute yourself and turn your webcam off. Thank you. And so if anyone would like to make a comment on this particular project, please do so by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. A raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. You only need to click it one time. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. And I will give it just a moment if anyone wishes to raise their hand. And in the meantime, Ms. Good, did we receive any written correspondence for this project?
No, Madam Chair, we have not received anything regarding this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for confirming that. Again, I do not see any raised hands at the time. So I will go ahead and close public comment. And we will go back. If I can ask Ms. Plummer and Ms. Hughes to come back on so we can discuss this. So I guess, Ms. Hughes, can you tell me a little bit, Ms. Plummer had mentioned that it was only that for the other building permit, that it wasn't until construction was underway that there was recognition that it would need to be a demo rebuild. Is that correct?
That's correct. We originally were planning on just doing an addition with a remodel, mostly leaving the existing window openings in place and just replacing. But then the inspector, when he went out to the site, instructed the contractor to demolish the existing walls.
And that other than the demo rebuild, the footprint hasn't changed on that particular project, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And so here we're, as Ms. Plummer mentioned, today we're talking about a request for a parking modification to allow for the non-conforming condition of that one covered parking space to continue for the existing primary residence. And then there is this portion of the deck. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. We have, as I'm looking at this, I know that the ADU in and of itself is not required to, is not subject to design review by the Single Family Design Board, with exception to the second story deck. And I know that in our the Single Family Design Guidelines, the Good Neighbor policy, or the Good Neighbor guidelines, that any upper story deck or balconies is, the suggestion is to set back 15 feet from the interior lot line. And I know that what you're proposing is 9 feet. May I ask, Mr. Russell, would you mind going to the one of the elevations? I think it's the, what is it? The south elevation. And if Ms. Hughes, if you're able to help us get there, if you know
Page
it.
15.
Okay,
There you go.
there we go, to the south elevation.
Mhm.
Or we could look at it on the east elevation, I'm sorry. we can be on that page. Thank you. So one of the things that I do have purview over this particular deck, and I do think about privacy and a concern. Maybe you could say a little bit more about, you know, what this looks in on. I do want to let you know that I watched the Single Family Design Board consent meeting where you presented, and I know that they were comfortable with the 9-foot setback from the interior lot line, but they didn't necessarily have the same context of where the other building was. There wasn't an image of that. And maybe if you could just walk me through a little bit of kind of what your thinking is, or why you don't think that will be a privacy issue for the neighboring property.
Sure. The neighboring property at 237 San Clemente is actually owned by the same owner as this property. They have an ADU that is very similar to this, also along the southern property line, that as well has a second-story deck overlooking the adjacent property to the south of that lot. That one's a little bit further away from the property line, but that parcel is significantly larger than this one, so allows for a larger open space in the backyard, and also is a 2-story main residence. This deck is only 5 feet deep, so the area that's overlooking the neighboring property is actually very small. And then we step down the massing towards that property line with the roof over the storage area to kind of set back the ADU further from that adjacent property to kind of be more sensitive about privacy to that area. We also felt like opening the bifold doors kind of towards the back of the primary residence provided more privacy along that the south elevation, so that we only have very small openings looking onto the adjacent property. And the big opening is actually facing the residence on this parcel. So there's just really that 5-foot area that's overlooking the open space of the neighboring property.
And then did you ever consider on the south elevation any kind of screening element, even though it's a relatively small portion? Yeah, that bottom left-hand south elevation, something to screen that little portion.
There is an existing wall between the properties that's about 8 feet high, which is still, it does step up along the slope as well. So there's a wall. It probably doesn't screen up to necessarily past the guardrail elevation, so you can still look over that wall, but we also do have landscaping along that area, and we could provide some taller plant elements if needed.
Okay, well, you know, these are good neighbor guidelines. So it's the 15-foot is not a requirement. It's just a suggestion. And I understand that the Single Family Design Board consent members felt like it was sufficient. But I appreciate your walking me through your rationale and how you considered privacy. Because even if they are owned by the same person, you know, I think of something kind of a long-term thing that properties can change ownership. So I can go ahead and say that I went out on the site. I did see that there was no house there, and it is very much under construction. So it's, you know, you really have to use your imagination to kind of understand what it is, but you can really see the slope of the property. And, you know, the photos really help me to see like where the existing 1-car garage is located, and understanding that your desire to, you know, kind of unexpected situation of needing to demo and rebuild when you thought you were going to be using the existing foundation and the majority of the walls. But I'm looking at this really with the, like, how do I make the findings for a parking modification? And that specifically based on the trigger of the accessory dwelling unit and the storage area, that will not cause an increase in demand for a parking space or a loading zone in the immediate area. So I agree with staff's analysis on the parking modification. My findings are that it won't be inconsistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. And as I said, will not cause an increase in demand for parking space or loading zone. Also because of the state legislation and that there is transit within half a mile of this property. Again, so the demand for parking has not increased with this particular addition and development. I also am going to go ahead and make the findings for the coastal development permit that the accessory dwelling unit is consistent with the policies of the Coastal Act, and that it's also the accessory dwelling unit is consistent with all the policies of our local coastal program, specifically the coastal land use plan. And that I know that as part of my approval of this particular item, that there are conditions of approval attached to that. Ms. Plummer, just would you confirm that the standard conditions for the coastal development permit apply? You've not added any additional conditions of approval beyond the standard measures. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so thank you for confirming that for me. So yes, this project, my approval does come with the standard conditions of approval, which are outlined in the staff report. And I think that is all I need to do for this particular thing. If I'm missing anything, please let me know, Ms. Plummer, right now. I think I've made all my findings for that. So I can say that my decision on the parking modification is appealable. And if anyone wishes to appeal my decision, you would need to submit your appeal within 10 calendar days of my decision. And that would then be appealed to the Planning Commission. But otherwise, I think that's it. And I know that this particular project, just to kind of end, was reviewed by the single family. It will go back to the single family design board after I've seen this, and they were confident in the location of the deck, the second story deck, and I will yield to them in terms of design and how to best break up the massing of that particular covered porch. So thank you for your time. And I think that is the last item on the agenda. So I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.